This is the tragic story of the Sydney to Hobart 98 yacht race, resulting in 6 deaths, 5 sunken boats, and 55 rescued sailors. The Sydney to Hobart Yacht Race is an annual event hosted by the Cruising Yacht Club of Australia. It starts in Sydney, New South Wales on Boxing Day. Then it heads south through the Tasman Sea, past Bass Strait, into Storm Bay and up the Derwent River. It finishes in Hobart, Tasmania. The race covers a distance of approximately 630 nautical miles. It's widely viewed as one of the most challenging yacht races in the world. In December 1998, Gary Shipper, a policeman from Victoria, spends Christmas Day with his wife Jan and 2 sons, Clinton and Justin. They open presents under the Christmas tree and have lunch with his family. The next day, the celebrations are over. The boys say goodbye to their dad and wish him luck. They're too young to fully grasp where their dad is going or the dangers he might face, but they can feel the heavy atmosphere from their parents and family. Now, Gary needs to put those celebrations out of his mind and focus on the race. A crowd of sailors gather for the final briefing at the Cruising Yacht Club of Australia in Sydney. The sailors are warned of a low-pressure system forming off the east coast. At 1300 in Sydney Harbour, the starter gun fires and 115 yachts set sail east out of Sydney Harbour towards the Tasman Sea. I stole my son's sailboat to show you how the points of sail work. The wind is coming from the west-southwest, filling their sails from the starboard aft quarter. It's pushing the yachts forward from behind and slightly to their right. They let their sails out to catch the wind. When the wind is following or coming from behind, it's quite a comfortable point of sail. A point of sail is the direction of the yacht relative to the direction of the wind. The reason that a following wind is comfortable is because the yacht sits flat, level with the water. And because the yacht is going in the same direction as the wind, you don't feel or hear the wind blowing in your face. Before we find out more about Larry Ellison and his yacht Sayonara, I want to tell you about the sponsor of this video, ExpressVPN, who want to give you an extra 3 months for free if you use the link in the description. I'm sure you're familiar with what a VPN does. It essentially hides your online interaction. I live in Germany, but I used to live in the UK and I grew up in South Africa. After I moved to Germany, I noticed that some of my favorite shows on Netflix just didn't show up. And Netflix limits the shows in your country too. There are shows in the UK that aren't available in the US. ExpressVPN lets me change my online location to wherever I want in the world, and I immediately get access to different shows. Like the Ocean's movie franchise, which is available in Germany but not in the US or the UK. When you browse the internet without ExpressVPN, very simple pieces of private information like where you are in the world have an impact on your experience. If you want to secure your private information and get more from the internet, go to expressvpn.com/waterline to get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN absolutely free. The link is in the description. In 1998, Larry Ellison is the Chief Technology Officer and majority shareholder of Oracle. He bought his first yacht at the age of 25, and since then he's raced almost every major sailing event around the world. In the 90s, Ellison won 5 Maxi World Championships on board his 78-foot yacht Sayonara. Now, Ellison sails Sayonara out of Sydney and turns to starboard to head south down the coast through the Tasman Sea towards Bass Strait. As they turn south, the point of sail changes. The wind comes almost directly from the west. It's hitting the yacht beam on, which means it's coming almost directly from the side of the yacht, neither from the front nor the back. Ellison tightens the sail so it's at roughly a 45-degree angle from the direction the boat is sailing. Despite the wind coming from the side, this is actually the fastest point of sail. As the wind passes over the sail, it creates a low pressure in front of the sail and pulls the sail into the shape of an aeroplane wing. The low pressure in front of the sail creates a vacuum and pulls the sail forward at the same 45-degree angle to the boat. The boat starts to heel slightly, which means it's no longer sitting flat in the water. It sits at a slight angle to the water because the wind is trying to pull the sail over. Now the keel underwater provides a counterweight and also channels the water like a rudder. The low pressure in front of the sail pulls the sail forward, and that force is counterbalanced by the keel, resulting in forward momentum. As the wind intensifies and the skies slowly darken, Sayonara is going over 21 knots, which is almost 25 miles per hour. Most recreational sailing yachts average around 5 knots. The low pressure from the storm is gathering. It's the storm they've prepared for. At 0100, going into the morning of the 27th, Ellison's navigator plots their position and lets Ellison know at 12 hours into the race, they're more than twice as fast as the race's record holder. Ellison replies, "We're not supposed to go that fast." He wonders if the smaller yachts will be able to handle the high winds. The rules of the race prevent him from telling the rest of the fleet how strong the winds are this far south. Sharing weather information could give the rest of the fleet an advantage, or alternatively, a yacht could give false information in order to give themselves an advantage. So yachts aren't allowed to share information about the weather or the conditions of the sea. Typically, low pressure systems or cold fronts sweep across the south of Australia and dissipate or move quickly on. Sailors often encounter these weather systems, and even though they can be uncomfortable, they also provide the wind needed for an exciting race. The race briefing said to expect some nasty weather, and the crews entering Bass Strait are resigned to a rough ride. Another yacht entering Bass Strait is Sword of Orion. At the helm is British Olympian sailor Glyn Charles. Charles has already competed in the Atlanta Olympics in 1996 and is preparing to enter the 2000 Sydney Olympics with a 6.9 meter two-man yacht. He can feel the low pressure system gathering momentum. Although the yachts in the race know there's a low pressure system forming, the Weather Bureau doesn't give specific and measurable information about the sea state. Both Ellison and Charles know to expect rough weather, but the Weather Bureau doesn't state the expected wind speed or the height of the waves. While they sail south through the Tasman Sea, they're protected from the wind by the land, which acts as a barrier, slowing the wind before it reaches them. What Ellison and Charles don't know is that they're sailing into an East Coast low. Unlike the frequent cold weather systems experienced by most sailors in the Sydney to Hobart every year, this East Coast low is formed in a completely different way. A large bubble of cold polar air slowly pushes north. When it reaches southern Australia, the warmer landmass pushes back, forcing the cold air into the upper hemisphere. A large mass of cold air breaks free and drifts slowly over Australia, creating an extreme low pressure cell that doesn't dissipate or pass quickly. Adding to that is a high pressure system of warm air that's moved south from the equator ahead of the low pressure system. The weather in Bass Strait is a combination of a slow moving extreme low pitted against an extreme high. And it doesn't blow over quickly, which gives the sea more time to build. Surface current running west to east along the southern edge of Australia accompany wind and waves moving in a northeasterly direction. Wind gusts around Wilson's Promontory reach speeds of 90 knots and waves estimated at 30 meters high. The fleet of 115 yachts are starting to spread into 3 broad groups. The leaders begin to enter Bass Strait in the early hours of the 27th. The wind blowing through the strait is uninterrupted by any landmass. As the frontrunners sail into the strait, they leave the protection of the land and the wind builds from 30 to 40 to 60 knots in a matter of minutes. The waves and the wind batter the yachts from the side, causing them to roll off the waves while the wind knocks them down. The wind and waves in Bass Strait are both coming from the same direction. The yachts are already heeling at their beam-on point of sail. Now they're also rolling dangerously over the side of the waves. Yacht Sword of Orion is in Bass Strait with Glyn Charles at the helm. Winds are reaching 80 to 90 knots. The yacht's been knocked down more than once. Glyn knows they need to tell the rest of the fleet. Making a radio call means they'll be disqualified if they make it out alive. His girlfriend Annie is also a sailor. would she make the call? Glyn thinks about his mom and his sister in England. A sailor needs to know that they can cope with whatever the ocean throws at them. If they make a radio call, they're accepting defeat. In order to make that call to warn the rest of the fleet, at best, you face the shame of giving up. And at worst, you have to come to terms with your own mortality. And you still have to sail through it knowing that you've already given up. Policeman Gary Shipper is a crew member on the 12.5-meter yacht Challenge Again sailing into Bass Strait. Challenge Again battles through the high winds and massive waves washing over the deck. At 0100, Shipper is working on deck. He doesn't have any safety gear. He has no buoyancy vest. He isn't attached to the deck with a harness and tether, and he doesn't have an EPIRB or emergency position indicating radio beacon. In the middle of the night, the huge seas and relentless wind pushes the boat Challenge Again past 90 degrees. The deck that Shipper was sitting on is no longer underneath him. He drops from the high side of the yacht into the dark sea. Shipper hears someone call "man overboard." The voice disappears behind the roar of the waves and the wind. As he fights to keep his head above water, he wonders how the boat is going to find and pick him up. The waves are like cliffs. The boat disappears into the trough between the waves and reappears as the waves wash over him. With no electronic positioning device, Shipper is left stranded in the stormy seas. Then he remembers he has a waterproof torch. It's all he has to signal the crew to his location in the pitch black and violent seas. He's in the water for almost half an hour. The crew on board perform a textbook rescue. They turn the boat around and land almost directly on top of him. Again, they turn the boat so the weather washes him into the boat. The wind is gusting up to 90 knots with crashing waves over 30 meters high. Don Buckley is below deck on board yacht B-52. The boat's been knocked down past 90 degrees more than once with the sail fully submerged. The boat roars up a wave as the helmsman screams, "Look out!" B-52 falls off the crest of the wave, crashing into the water upside down. The screeching wind and rain gives way to the sound of the boat crashing into the water like a car wreck. The boat surfaces, but it's filled with water and equipment is thrown around the cabin and the deck. A stovetop strikes a female crew member in the head and she's trapped underwater. Another man's head is stuck in the steering wheel. Don snaps himself out of his safety harness and goes overboard, leaving him 40 meters away from the boat. Luckily, he's able to swim back and climb on board. On board Sword of Orion, the crew are in a fight for survival. They decide to break the course rules and report the weather conditions to the rest of the fleet. They know the race is over. Jeff Hill on board Antipodes Sydney and the rest of the fleet haven't yet entered Bass Strait, but are already facing severe conditions. Jeff hears the radio call. At 1700 on the 27th of December, Australian authorities issue a general mayday. Jeff continues to sail south. He and his crew have a lot of time and money invested in this race. He knows that for some of them, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If they retire, they have to head home, wondering if they could have made it. If they continue into Bass Strait, he wonders if they'll make it home alive. He could never face the wives and children of his crew if anything happened to them. He decides to retire from the race and plots a course for the closest safe harbour at Eden. 39 other yachts follow. They know that the cost of losing their lives far outweighs the foolish pride of putting themselves in even more danger than they already are. But Glyn Charles, Larry Ellison and Gary Shipper are still battling for their lives in Bass Strait. Yacht Winston Churchill is knocked down as it falls off a wave. The 9 crew members scramble to ready the life raft as the yacht takes on water. Abandoning a yacht in such heavy weather means stepping off a solid deck and into an inflatable raft with nothing between you and the water but a thin sheet of plastic. As they haul themselves into the life rafts, they wonder if they'll see their families again. The 630 nautical mile adventure has deteriorated into a fight for survival, and it's only getting worse. Coastal Patrol volunteers at Eden work around the clock to coordinate rescues over the radio. 35 military and civilian aircraft and 27 Royal Australian Navy vessels join the rescue. Former British Olympian Glyn Charles is swept overboard from Sword of Orion and drowns. His body is never recovered. His mom and sister aren't able to bury him. On board the yacht Winston Churchill, the team manages to get aboard their life rafts. But one of those life rafts tumbles through the waves and is ripped apart. All 3 crew members drown. The yacht Business Post Naiad is demasted and rolls through the waves. The skipper has a heart attack and another crew member is fatally injured. After going overboard and being rescued, Gary Shipper on board Challenge again makes it across the finish line in 24th place. His wife and sons get to spend another Christmas with him. Sydney to Hobart 98 yacht race is Australia's biggest ever peacetime rescue operation with almost 1,000 rescue personnel. 55 sailors are rescued from their yachts by ships and helicopters. 115 yachts started the race. 5 sink, 7 are abandoned, and 59 retire at Eden. Despite everything, 44 yachts made it to the finish line. Larry Ellison on Sayonara is first across the line at around 0800 on the 29th of December, but there are no victory celebrations. The 44th and final yacht to arrive, Misty, crosses the line 2 days later in Hobart on the 31st of December. The tragedy of Sydney to Hobart 98 changed the face of yacht racing for good. Since then, equipment has improved. Better life jackets, better harnesses, personal EPIRBs, better education and training, better weather data. There have been improvements in the coordination between weather services and race organisers to provide detailed information about specific wave heights and wind speeds. And the rules have changed. Yachts must now communicate high winds above 40 knots to the fleet. Gary Shipper continued sailing and advocating for safety at sea until he passed away in 2010. On the 30th of December, just 4 days after the start of the race, a public memorial was held at Constitution Dock to commemorate the 6 dead sailors. Hugo van Kretschmar, Commodore of the Cruising Yacht Club of Australia, who organised the race, reads out a statement.
Mike Bannister, John Dean, Jim Lawler, Glyn Charles, Bruce Guy, Phil Skeggs. May the everlasting voyage you have now embarked on be blessed with calm seas and gentle breezes. May you never have to reef or change a headsail in the night. May your bunk be always warm and dry.
A special thanks to ExpressVPN for sponsoring this video. Use the link in the description for an extra 3 months of free service.